Time now for our weekly segment, Voices of the Region, when we hear from an area journalist about stories in the news. This week, our guest is Timberjay publisher Marshall Helmberger in Tower, Minnesota.
About 750 voters here in the North Country reshaped Minnesota state government on Tuesday when they narrowly elected Hermantown Councilmember Grant Hauschild to represent them in the Minnesota Senate. Hauschild edged Babbitt Mayor Andrea Zupancic by less than 1,000 votes, and his victory gave the DFL the magic number of 34 seats in the 67-member Senate to regain control for the first time in more than 6 years. Hauschild brought an impressive resume to the race, having served as political director for former North Dakota U.S. Senator Heidi Heitkamp. He also worked on rural development with the U.S. Department of Agriculture in the Obama administration. Hauschild's political experience showed, and he ran a well-organized effort in a district that had been trending increasingly Republican. He was helped by solid returns in the 6B portion of the district, around the Hermantown area surrounding Duluth. He also performed well in Cook and Lake counties, while Zupancic led in most precincts in the 6A portion of the district, which is located mostly in the northern fringes there. Although Hauschild performed well enough in the northern portions of the district to hang on for the win. It is worth noting that it appears that Ely Mayor Republican Roger Scraba has defeated DFLer Rob Eklund of International Falls in that House District 3A, and though that's by a razor-thin margin, and that could, or very likely, in fact, will go to a recount since it's probably less than 24 votes separating them currently. Tuesday's vote was likely a disappointment for Republicans in northeastern Minnesota. There had been considerable talk in recent weeks of turning the Iron Range red. While that could be in the cards at some point in the future, it didn't play out that way on Tuesday. The major cities on the Iron Range, including Virginia, Hibbing, Eveleth, and Ely, all backed Walz in the governor's race, and most backed DFLers in statewide races across the board, albeit by margins that pale in comparison to the DFL's glory days in the region. North of the range, in the rural townships in the heart of our coverage area, the shift towards the Republicans in recent years definitely continued, with only a few exceptions. This part of the county largely went for Republican candidates, in some cases by 2-to-1 margins. Perhaps the biggest bright spot for the GOP came with Pete Stauber's reelection to Congress from the 8th District by a 57 to 43% margin. Although that was solely based on the strength of Stauber's support in more southerly parts of the district, down around east central Minnesota, the Brainerd Lakes area, and some of the northern Twin Cities suburbs. In the Arrowhead, voters actually backed Stauber's DFL challenger, Jen Schultz, by substantial margins. She won St. Louis County 57 to 43% and took Cook County by a better than 2-to-1 margin. Schultz also edged Stauber in Lake County 51 to 48%. And finally, we're reporting on the death of former Senator Doug Johnson, who passed away Monday at the age of 80 after an extended illness. Johnson, in his heyday, was one of Minnesota's most influential politicians. He began his rise to prominence in the 1960s when he was elected mayor of his hometown of Cook when he was just 23 years old. He later ran successfully for the legislature, serving in the Minnesota House from 1971 to 1976, and voters advanced him to the state Senate 4 years later, and it was there that he developed his reputation as a shrewd political strategist and with a populist flair. Johnson frequently drew criticism from many metro area legislators who viewed him as using his position to benefit northeastern Minnesota, but it was a criticism that he definitely wore as a badge of honor, and it earned him the overwhelming support of his constituents, who returned him year after year with huge margins. I think 1998 was probably the highlight of his political career, when he launched a surprisingly strong gubernatorial bid in which he took on the heirs of 4 Minnesota dynasties in a 5-way DFL primary, finishing a very strong third, ahead of such notables as Mark Dayton and Ted Mondale.